Hi there, I'm Cory Driver. This is Moving Forward. So this week, as we prepare for Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday, however you are marking the occasion, we have some texts about justice and grace. We are in Isaiah 50 and Matthew 26 and maybe 27. I think we need to talk this week about justice and grace. And the grace that costs. There's been another school shooting this week. And I've got kids. And that is all the frame that I need to see these texts. So Isaiah 50 is the third of four servant songs in the latter parts of Isaiah. And this servant is God's instrument, tool, to do a new thing amongst God's people. In the verses just before the lectionary passage, God intimates that, yes, Israel has suffered for its sins, but God has never given up on the people. Indeed, God holds God's claim and says, "You are still mine." And so the servant comes with a word that comforts the weary. But the servant does not receive a warm welcome. The servant is beaten, spit upon, and mocked. Why? Why? Well, the word is, "You who have suffered, even you who have suffered rightly for what you have done, God still loves you. You are still God's." Justice demands punishment, and punishment has been meted out. But God's grace does not give up on anyone. And so as we turn then to the Palm and or Passion Sunday texts, we see Jesus as an instrument of justice and grace, perhaps in the very same way as the servant from Isaiah. So Jesus institutes the Eucharistic celebration. And as part of that, mentions that the disciples, the apostles, many of those there, perhaps all of them, would betray Jesus. Peter says, "Surely not I." Jesus says, "Yeah, actually you kind of most, or it's certainly more often." Judas dips his hand in the dish with Jesus, and Jesus still serves, right? Judas comes to Jesus to betray him with a kiss, the gospel account says, and Jesus addresses Judas as friend. The Passion narrative has disciples abandon Jesus, priests and fellow condemned folks mock Jesus, the soldiers torment Jesus. Many of the folks who follow Jesus turn away. And yet Jesus chooses to die. Now, we all have our favorite metaphor for the salvific work on the cross. And let me say, at the beginning of this sort of thought paragraph, they're all metaphors, and it's a mystery. We can't say this is exactly what happens. And if we do, we're probably being falsely overconfident. I think that we want to have some humility. So, look, I'm a Christus Victor guy. I think penal substitutionary atonement was invented a little bit too late for me to have that be my preferred model. I think Jesus mounts a raid into the realms of sin and death and captures folks who have gotten ourselves in a mess. The metaphor here is, of course, that of the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, the blood avenger. It is the person who, in an extended family clan, is responsible for saving people from the messes that they have gotten themselves in or they have been captured into. So if you become impoverished and sell yourself into temporary slavery, like the 6-year slavery that is allowable for Israelites, the kinsman redeemer's job is not to say, well, you shouldn't have done that. It is to buy your freedom, right? If you've been kidnapped, the kinsman redeemer's job is to come along and save you, right? If you have been taken capture through no fault of your own, salvation. If you have been taken capture through explicit fault of your own, salvation. Right? If there is a widow, especially a childless widow, the kinsman redeemer is to step in. If there is murder and there's not justice for that murder, the kinsman redeemer is to step in. The kinsman redeemer says, I will save you, and if you get hurt, I will punish those who hurt you so that we will be safe. Right? And that, I think, is what Jesus does here. Jesus says, look, humanity, you have gotten yourself into some trouble. And there is justice. Also, it is my job to save you. To save you from the consequences of your own actions. And it is going to cost. The person who is purchased out of slavery by the kinsman redeemer does not owe the kinsman redeemer money, right? It's not a debt you pay off. The kinsman redeemer, simply by having power, simply by having resources, simply by being the responsible entity, has to purchase the people out of slavery. Jesus, by being the Son of God, God by being God, has to purchase humans out of slavery to sin and death. That's simply what one does. And it's exactly what Jesus does here. And it comes at a cost. We see as the narrative continues, as Jesus dies, the temple of the curtain is torn from top to bottom. Now, I'm sure you've heard things about this. It is not general admission to the Holy of Holies. That's not what this is about. The detail is from top to bottom. Now, why would it be from top to bottom? Why not from bottom to top to let people in? Well, the thing is, God is mourning. God has watched God's Son be murdered to save people from the powers of sin and death, and God is rending God's garments, right? That ultimate sign of mourning where you cannot even scream enough, but you tear your clothes to say, I don't have anything else. I just watched somebody die who wasn't supposed to die. That's where I'm at today, thinking about kids dying who weren't supposed to die. The whole earth shakes. The rocks are split. The tombs are open when God howls, no, it wasn't supposed to be this way. And Jesus stays in the tomb, stays in the dead when so many others come out. Certainly agreeing that it wasn't supposed to be this way. But this is the cost that God is willing to undergo, that Jesus is willing to undergo to save those, all of us, who have gotten into trouble. God knows what it is like to be a bereaved parent. And Jesus dies to save humanity from the powers of sin and death. That's a timeless message. And in a week, hopefully, by Sunday, we're still talking about kids and adults murdered before their time. We could think about rejecting death dealing, rejecting the powers of sin and death, where notions of safety and rights are more important, it seems, than the lives of babies who don't get to go home to their moms and dads. God chooses grace. There's justice, to be sure. Justice and grace are inseparable as the love of a father for a son. But God chooses to save at high cost us humans who keep getting it wrong. And Jesus takes us out of bondage to sin and death, and I think allows, demands us to embrace life and to take very seriously the life, the righteousness, the freedom from fear of death that he purchases for us at great cost, and to act as Christ's hands and feet and mouth, maybe especially mouth, in the places where we are put. So this week, as we talk about welcoming the King of Peace with palms and witnessing the salvific death of Jesus, let's reject death. Let's embrace grace. Embrace justice. Embrace all the rescuing work that God does and not say, ho-hum, we'll just go on with life, but really live into the rejection of sin and death and celebration of grace and pardon as our divine kinsman redeemer plucks us out and says, I've got you. I will save you. Let's be grateful for that and partner with God to maybe help save each other. Amen.